One of the interesting stories of Christ and his disciples, he's trying to get his disciples to understand why this message, this gospel message, had to happen a certain way. And he's walking with his disciples north out of Galilee, and there's not really much there in archaeology and in towns. There wasn't a lot of settlements there, so I'm sure the disciples are discussing among themselves, where are we going? Where is this rabbi taking us? This is the mountains in the northern Galilean mountains. There's only a couple locations. You're either going to head up north to go to Damascus or Caesarea Philippi. And I think the closer they get to Caesarea Philippi, many of these guys are going, wait a minute here, Caesarea Philippi is a very pagan city. My dad, grandpa, would not approve of me going there. And Christ just goes into Caesarea Philippi. And you have to understand what the Caesarea Philippi is. This is the worship center of Caesarea Philippi. And a couple key things that are here. Here in the middle is a temple to Zeus. This is a temple to Caesar. And right behind it is a big opening, a big cave. And this, in history, was understood to be the place where the gods would go into the underworld. And they called it the gates of hell, or gates of Hades. So a couple places in history we have these gates of Hades where the gods were known to come in and out. That's what they believed. And they built this massive complex here to worship the gods and recognize this is the gates of Hades. Over here is the temple of the dancing goats. And in the worship of Pan, it involves extremely sexual activity. Pan himself is a horned human figure with no other way to say it, a massively erect phallus on the idol itself, and that is what's worshipped. And during the worship of Pan, there is open sexual relationships between the priest and the onlookers, and then it moves into relations with the goats themselves, males with female goats, females with male goats. This is Pan. This is Caesarea Philippi. And Christ and his disciples, these young guys out of Galilee, are marching up here, and I think they're going, oh my, what's happening here? And when he gets there, it says they're in the vicinity of Caesarea Philippi. Christ asked them a question, and he says, who do you say that I am? Or who do they say that I am? And some said, well, he's John the Baptist or Elijah. Some say Jeremiah. I think that's an interesting point. Why would you say Jeremiah, that Christ is like Jeremiah, the guy that spoke for 23 years and no one heard? He says, some say Jeremiah. What about you, he asks. And Peter speaks up here and says, you are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. Which is interesting because rarely do you have this as announcement of them saying that you are the living God. Is Peter looking at these gods here, Zeus, the temple of Caesar, or the dancing goats with Pan, and going, no, Christ, you are the living God? Christ responds, blessed are you, Simon, son of a dove. Flesh and blood did not reveal this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are the bedrock, and on this rock I will build my church. What rock? Some say it's Peter, because Peter's name is Petros, which can be the rock, and I think there's validity in that because it says we are built as the temple on the foundation of the apostles. That's scriptural. Some people say that it's Christ himself, and you can look at that. He's the cornerstone. He's the foundation stone. We can look at it that way. But I think there's something else here because the rabbis during this time recognized that this rock was called the rock of the gods. And I think in some way Christ is looking at the disciples and saying, guys, I want you to build my church on this rock. How do we look at that? How do we know that that could possibly be the way? Because the next thing he says, and the gates of Hades won't prevail against it. Now, are gates, what in a warfare, what is the main purpose of a gate? Defense. And if the gates of Hades are not able to overcome it, or what happens? What is going on here? Is the gates of Hades marching in and conquering? Or is Christians marching through and saying, no, I'm going to build my church here? Now, there's an interesting thing here that happens next. Because the disciples are struggling with, Should we eat with sinners? Should we recognize that the Romans shouldn't be all destroyed and wiped off the planet? Are Gentiles valued in the kingdom? Are they even a part of the kingdom of heaven, or should they be destroyed? And Christ is trying to teach them this. And the next thing is very interesting. It says that Christ calls to the crowd. What crowd? Is this a crowd of Pharisees? This is a crowd of Sadducees? This is a crowd of Jewish people? He's at Caesarea Philippi. There's not a Jewish population there. You want to hear what he says? If anyone would follow me, let him take up his cross and come after me. Whoever would save his life will lose it. Whoever will lose his life for me and the good news of the kingdom will find it. What good is it if you gain the whole world and lose your soul? Deny yourself, take up your cross, follow me. I would have loved to have been there. Is he talking to these people down here worshiping with the goats? The question I have is, why does he say, take up your cross and follow me? Have any of you carried a cross? The follow-up question is, if you're carrying a cross, where are you walking to? If you're picking up a cross, where did Christ end up? It's an interesting thing to look at, going, okay, this is a different gospel than wealth, health, pleasure. So in this, while I've been studying the life of Paul and the early church, we look at his ministry and we go, wow, such an amazing impact of all these letters written, all these churches started, everything was going well, and the just blossoming of this early church movement. But it's hard for us to understand that he is doing this while he has experienced a life of continual suffering.